and welcome back. I'm CodeMarvelous with A&R Black Hats, and you're watching Deckbuilding Derezzed. On today's episode of Deckbuilding Derezzed, we're going to be discussing a corporation deck, specifically a Cybernetics Division deck, which is the new HB 40-15 identity, where both players start with a maximum hand size of 4 cards. What's interesting about this identity is, for the first time, a brain damage build with HB is possible because the runner starts with already a reduced hand size of 1. So this deck is built around landing some brain damage, reducing the runner's hand size and options and affecting their ability to draw and play cards, and then setting up a money pool to hit with a punitive counterstrike after reducing the hand size. It uses only 5/3 agendas and domestic sleepers as a way of basically making it very easy to land a kill, whether you land brain damage or not. But if you can land brain damage, it makes the deck really threatening and really controls what the runner can and cannot run. So I'm not going to really belabor it too much in the introduction because it's kind of hard to understand without looking at the cards, but I'm really excited about it. It's not really a tier 1 deck, but it is like a riot to play. So let's go through the cards and I'll talk a little bit about how to play HB's first really viable damage build besides Dead Coats. So first things first, if we're going to discuss a Cybernetics Division deck, let's review again what the identity actually does. I've been excited about this identity for quite some time. Cybernetics Division is an HB identity with the subtitle Humanity Upgraded. It is a 40 minimum deck size, 15 influence, corp division that states that each player's maximum hand size is reduced by 1. So this has a couple of interesting side effects. 1, it's a 40 card deck, which means that you're going to be able to find whatever it is you're looking for more easily. Second, hey Thor, how's it going? Thanks for your help. Appreciate that. Yeah. Second of all, you still have a full 15 influence, which enables you to import enough to get a good kill. And lastly, the hand size of the runner and you starts at 4. So what that means is that you're going to be able to threaten a kill more easily. Because if they are stealing agendas, one Plascrete Carapace might not be enough to save them depending on how many cards they're left with, right? Also, it makes it so that as the runner is drawing, maybe looking for things that it needs, they're going to have to discard more cards at the end of their turn than they're used to. And what I found just in my short time playing this deck is that the reduced hand size of the runner, people mentally have this training to draw up to 5 cards, and they end up having to throw stuff away a lot of the time or spend clicks that they want to spend running using those cards to install or using econ early instead of running. So what that means is it ultimately buys you time and it puts pressure and compression on the runner. There is a downside to this division, and that is that your hand size is also reduced by 1, making you more vulnerable to legwork. Because if you are holding agendas that you can't score in your hand, they're going to have a higher likelihood of seeing them on a legwork run than if you had 5 cards in your hand. As far as agendas are concerned, let's start there. So I only have 5/3 agendas, as I mentioned in the introduction. The spread is something I'm still working on, and feel free to do whatever you think is going to be best. I have a total of 6 agendas that are actually worth points, plus 2 domestic sleepers, which can become points, but are mostly just there to help me close out a game more easily. So, I have 2 Project Wotans. These are in here because they're the native HB 5/3, and they can help me score if I really need to, because anything that's Bioroid, like my Victors, my Eli's, my Ichis, my Janice, and my Heimdalls, can all get extra end-the-run counters on it, which if I stack them up with end-the-run counters and they need to click through to get an agenda, I might be able to get that extra brain damage off the Victor 1 or the Heimdall 1. So it's there because it synergizes with a lot of my brain damage causing ice. In addition to that, I have 2 priority requisitions, because if I can manage to Mushin one of them out, or even hard score one and get a free Janus or a Heimdall 2 out of the deal, that's a huge power swing in my favor and really slows down the runner and changes what servers they're able to run. I have one Hades fragment and one Utopia fragment, so bear with me here. These are one-ofs, all the fragments are, but the Hades fragment is great because if you can manage to get it scored, you can recycle kill cards, money cards, maybe ice that's getting destroyed, because this deck does run kind of ice light. The Utopia fragment can be good because if I manage to score it, if I Mushin no Shin out another 5/3, they have to pay an additional 2 credits for each advancement in order to steal it. So if I get the Utopia out and then I Mushin a priority requisition, whatever's in that server, they have to also pay 6 credits to get the priority requisition, which makes it easier for me to land Punitive Counterstrike. Now, I'm also going to mention that my deck, which you may or may not have seen on Netrunner DB, the Spiteful Mind, is similar to this, but not the same. This is actually a deck called Dane Bramage, which I'm going to link in the comments. Another Netrunner DB patron made this deck, and I think it's a much better implementation of the idea that I was trying to tease out, focusing on event-driven economy instead of assets to be able to threaten that kill more quickly. And even that deck isn't exactly the same as this, so I'm going to link my tweaked version of his list on there. But yeah, look at all 3 decks and, see what you can glean out of it. So the domestic sleepers, are basically meant to be used if I'm not able to score the kill anymore, but I've scored 2 agendas, the runner scored 2 agendas, I can get the domestic sleepers out and then start that, well, you better win this turn or I win the game next turn countdown clock. It makes it so that I don't have to score 3 5/3s in order to win. So, moving from agendas, let's talk about operation economy. So, one of the things that you should notice is that this is a very operation heavy as opposed to asset heavy HB. What I was finding in my version, the Spiteful Mind, where I was trying to still do the normal HB thing of Adonis and Eve, it was too slow and I was investing too much in protecting them, and that's not what this deck was all about. This deck was all about threatening a kill really quickly. So we do the standard 3 hedge funds, but in addition to that we have 3 green level clearances because they help me get cards and get money to find the kill combo more quickly, and they help me recover from a siphon. I have restructures because it's quick economy once I'm at 10, which I generally get to very quickly because I'm not rezzing a ton of ice. Thank you, Thor. I appreciate that. In addition to that, we have 3 Mushin no Shins, and this is really the all-star of this deck. Mushin no Shin, it's a double. You install any card and you put 3 advancements on it in a new server. So what this does is it enables you to put a 5/3 on the table with 3 advancement counters on it, or a Cerebral Overwriter with 3 counters on it. The runner has to decide which one they thinks it is, because if they're wrong and they hit a Cerebral Overwriter, they're going to take 3 brain damage, and now with Cybernetics Division, their total hand size is reduced down to 1, which completely alters what they're able to install, what they're able to do, and also improves the potency of things like Punitive Counterstrike. So Mushin no Shin is a tremendous card. Even if you just Mushin no Shin out an actual agenda instead of a Cerebral Overwriter, if they run it and you're holding the 2 Punitive Counterstrikes in hand, then you're going to just blast them off the face of the earth if you have the money for it. Or if you're holding a Punitive Counterstrike and an Archive Memories, you can click 1 Punitive Counterstrike, click 2 Archive Memories, bring the Punitive Counterstrike back, and just kill them. For those of you, also, I'm going to double back real quick. Green Level Clearance is a 1-cost AHB event that says gain 3 credits and draw 1 card, so it's basically a click compression card. It gives you 2 credits and a card for 1 click. While we're on the subject of critical operations for this deck, we have 3 Punitive Counterstrikes, which make up 6 of our 15 influence, along with the Mushin no Shins, for a total of 12 of our 15 influence. Punitive Counterstrike is a 3-cost Black Ops operation that generates a 5 strength trace. If successful, do meat damage equal to the number of agenda points that the runner stole last turn. So if I'm running all 5 threes, if they grabbed an agenda, I'm going to be doing a minimum of 3 damage with a successful punitive counterstrike. Furthermore, if they stole 2 agendas, then it's going to make it really easy for me to score that kill with 2 punitives in hand, even if they have a Plascrete. So I really like this setup. One of the things that is a side effect of this deck is if you get shut out, if they get to 6 points and you don't have the punitive counterstrike in hand or you don't have more money than them, that entire kill condition goes off and you're probably going to lose. I'm not going to lie. But what I have found is those situations where that happens is very rare if you pilot this deck well, which means click for a lot of credits, draw a lot of cards, get the punitive counterstrike out, and try to get them to run Cerebral Overriders. Now, from a play perspective with these, the punitive counterstrikes combo really well with the archive memories. When you see the 2 archive memories, which is a 0 cost operation that lets you take 1 card out of the trash and put it back into HQ, you should consider these 2 archive memories as 2 extra copies of punitive counterstrike once you've seen your first one. So what this enables you to do is it increases the likelihood that you're going to find punitive counterstrike early enough to be able to land the double punitive kill after landing brain damage or after they steal 6 points. It's very important in this deck that you're very judicious about rezzing ice, and what I mean when I say that is you only res ice when it's going to be effective. Taxing people a ton isn't a priority in this deck, unlike most HB decks. The primary objective in this deck is to have the punitive and the money to kill them when they steal 1 agenda or 2 agendas. So you need to kind of get out of your normal HB headspace of rezzing stuff specifically to tax and only really res when stuff's going to be impactful. When we talk about ice, I'm going to explain a little bit more about how certain ice in the game will become unrezzable and kind of unusable in certain situations. So those are our operations. Moving from there, I want to discuss very briefly the 6 assets that we have. We have 3 Jackson Howards, which is par for the course in this game, except for instead of always using it to save agendas, if you know you can land the kill, I wouldn't use it to save agendas. I would use it to rescue maybe ice and money or Mooshians. But for the most part, the Jackson Howards are to recover tools, not agendas. Because remember, this deck is all about setting up a punitive kill. Cerebral Overrider is a 0 cost HB asset. It's an ambush that says that Cerebral Overrider can be advanced. If you pay 3 credits when the runner accesses Cerebral Overrider, you do 1 brain damage for each advancement on Cerebral Overrider. So this is an incredible powerful card in this deck because we don't have to use actual clicks and credits to advance it. We can spend 2 clicks and 0 credits to get it out with Mushin no Shin, and then it will have 3 counters on it. So if they decide that they think that's an agenda and they run it, if you have even 3 credits, you're going to be reducing the runner's hand size to 1 card, which even if you never land the punitive kill, the runner having a hand size of 1 is super game changing. It stresses them out, they have to throw a bunch of stuff in the bin, and they're always worried about dying. Because if till the end of the game they haven't seen all your influence, they don't know that you're not running snares, right? So now when they run, they're going to draw up to 3 or 4 cards in order to deal with snare before running a central server, which means that you have more ability to threaten them and more ability to score the normal way because they're not going to want to run stuff. One of the other neat things about this deck is if you land a Cerebral Overrider, if you Mushin out another card, they have to decide whether or not it's worth the risk that it's another Cerebral Overrider and they lose immediately, or if it's a 5-3 and you score it. Now, what I will say is if you hit with a Cerebral Overrider and you have another Mushin and like a Pryrek, use it the next turn. Because if both of you are at 0 VP or agenda points, they're probably not going to run it because they're not going to risk flatlining when you're not threatening victory. What I will say, however, is if you are threatening victory, if you're at 4 points because you scored a Pryrek and a Domestic Sleepers, if you Mushin something, you have to assume that they're going to run it. Because if it's an agenda and they don't run it, they lose. If it's a Cerebral Overrider, they lose. So a lot of times if they don't have an option to do an R&D dig, or an HQ dig because they think that you're holding agendas in hand, when you're at game point, whatever you motion, they're probably going to run. Moving on from assets, ice choices in this deck. I want to start first with the sources of brain damage and why they're included and when it's a good idea to res them and when it's not. As far as cards that can potentially cause brain damage from an ice perspective, we have 2 Victor 1s, which is the 3 cost, 3 strength Code Gate from HB. It's a Bioroid. Says that the runner can spend 1 to break each subroutine, and it's subroutine 1 is do 1 brain damage, subroutine 2 is end the run. This is a cheap way to land brain damage. When do you res this? Well, you should res Victor 1 if they're dumb enough to run last click, and it's gonna hit. You should run Victor 1 if you want to disincentivize them and tax them some clicks. You don't want to res Victor 1 if, based on the ID and the cards you've seen, you think that the runner is using Yogg, or if Yogg's already on the table. Don't bother with it, right? It's essentially a dead card. You should only res Victor 1 when you have a pretty good likelihood of landing that brain damage. Now, one of the neat combos that I've found is people tend to expect Victor 1s more on centrals than they do on remotes. So a lot of times, if I do have a remote where I'm trying to score something out, I'll put a Victor 1 with an Eli in front of it. They'll click through the Eli and then say continue, and then I can res the Victor and land the brain damage. Other sources of brain damage, sticking with Code Gates, we have 1 Victor 2. Victor 2 is the 5 strength, 5 cost Code Gate. It's the beefier version of Victor 1. And this one you have to spend 2 clicks at once to break 2 subroutines. So it synergizes well with Project Wotan, because if I add even 1 end the run subroutine to it, they have to spend 2 clicks to break it. Thank you, Thor. Thor doesn't want Turing in this deck. It has 1 end the run subroutine and 1 trace 2 that places 1 counter on it, which you can remove to do brain damage. I don't expect this to hit very much. This is primarily a piece of central tax. If I can land it, so much so the better. Other sources of brain damage, we have Heimdall 1 and 2. Heimdall 1 is an 8 cost, 6 strength barrier that has the 1 click for each subroutine breakability of a Bioroid. And it does 1 brain damage, and then it has 2 end the run subroutines. I will res this a lot of times on centrals just to tax people out, but if I can land the brain damage, so much so the better. Heimdall 2, the beefier version of Heimdall, is at an 11 cost, 7 strength. You have to spend 2 to break 2 subroutines, and it has 1 brain damage and end the run, and 1 end the run. One of the neat things about Heimdall 2 is a lot of times if you're on game point, you can land multiple brain damage with this card, because if you put a Cerebral Overrider in your remote, advance it twice, and then put it behind this, if they know that it could be an agenda that could end the game for you, they're going to click through the brain damage and the end the run, the 2 end the run subroutines, take the brain damage and be like, screw it, let me see that card, and then they're going to get to the end of the server and take 2 more brain damage. Other brain damage causing cards, we have 2 Fenris, which many of you might have never seen before. So it's a 4 cost, 2 strength Sentry that gives you 1 bad publicity when you res it, and it does 1 brain damage and end the run. So this is the perfect example of an ice that's great when it works and blank when it's not appropriate. Basically, if they face check without a Mimic down and you have one of these, you res it, you land that brain damage, you cut their hand size down to 3. Once Mimic is on the table, this card becomes unresable, because all you're doing is giving them 1 credit every run for the rest of the game for a piece of ice that will ultimately only cost them 1 credit from that point on. It's not really a good exchange. Other brain damage, we have a single Janus 1.0, which is the 15 cost, 8 strength Sentry that has 1 click to break any subroutine on Janus, and it has 4 do 1 brain damage subroutines. This is one of my favorite pieces of brain damage ice. This deck generates a fair bit of money. So one of the things that you can do with this deck is if you're sitting on 15 credits and they've seen you, res some Elis, res some Victor 1s, and maybe a Fenris, they're like, okay, I see what this guy's doing. He's doing a brain damage thing, so he's got a lot of low strength ice that has a chance to land brain damage. And a lot of times I'll catch people kind of asleep at the wheel. They'll run 2nd or 3rd click against me, and I'll be able to res a Janus on a central, and they're only going to be able to click through maybe 1 or 2 of the subroutines, and I'm going to land 2 brain damage. Now, if you never find yourself in that kind of situation, if you can motion out a Pyrek, if the Janus is on the table, it's the primary target, because for the rest of the game, it's going to be something that they have to deal with, and they're probably not going to hard pay for it with a breaker and a ton of data sucker credits or what have you. What they're probably going to do is wait until they have the ability to make a couple of impactful runs and take the brain damage. Or, a lot of times what I see is they just stop running that server entirely, which is great for us. We also have Ichis, which have 5 cost, 4 strength, 3 subroutines, 1 click for each subroutine, and it's trash 1 program, and then it's a trace 1, and if it's successful, you give the runner 1 tag and do 1 brain damage. It is technically a piece of brain damage ice, but I don't really see it as such because you're not going to be terribly, terribly likely. What you might be able to do with this is jack up the trace and force them to burn more money, but I can't imagine you consistently landing brain damage with that card. But if you can get it, so much so the better. As far as hard end the run is concerned, we have 2 Turings, which is the 4 cost, 2 strength, non-Bioroid piece of HB ice that gets plus 3 strength when it's on a remote server. Can't be broken with AI breakers, and they can spend 3 clicks to get through it, otherwise they can't. This is a great piece of, man, I just really need to score it. Or what I really like is if I motion out a Cerebral Overrider and put a single Turing in front of it, they're probably going to run it first click, and they're going to be like, oh, this is an agenda, yeah. And they'll spend all 3 clicks, take a ton of brain damage from the Cerebral Overrider, be reduced to 1 card, and have no clicks to recover from it. So it can be a great play to basically, set up them having a really bad turn that makes them really scared. The other thing that's nice about Turing is if you do put it in front of a motioned agenda, once they click through and hit that Project Wotan or that Hades fragment, if you're holding the 2 punitives and got a ton of money, they have no clicks to get more money, right? So they have no ability to recover and prepare for the punitive hit. So that's why that's in there, because it synergizes very well with what we're trying to do. We also have 2 Elis, which are the 3 cost, 4 strength, ubiquitous ice of HB, which has 2 end the run subroutines, which can each be broken for a click. This is just really to tax on centrals and kind of slow people down. A couple of closing thoughts about this deck and how to pilot it. I would say that this deck is actually quite strong against Shapers and quite strong against Anarchs that aren't running Account Siphon, because there isn't a lot for Wizard to trash here, right? I don't necessarily care if Valencia is blackmailing in and seeing stuff, because I want you to steal stuff. What this deck is very vulnerable to is not having money, which means that it's disproportionately vulnerable to a criminal player. When you're playing against a criminal, you have to make sure, if you're playing against like Security Testing Andy, you lock down the centrals. Furthermore, you need to defend HQ first. You need to try to stop that account siphon, because that is going to be the thing that shuts down the entire functionality of this deck. If they can account siphon and then run the remote, the Cerebral Overrider doesn't do anything. So you have to protect HQ first. And you can leave R&D open for a little while, because if you are getting the money and you're keeping them from account siphoning you, then you can make sure if they do dig R&D and grab 2 Pyreks, you're going to just blast them off the face of the earth. But you have to make sure that you have the ability to make and keep money. Don't be afraid to click for credits, and don't be afraid to triple stack ice on HQ if you're up against a criminal player. I would say this deck does take a lot of skill to play, because you have to know when to motion things, when not to, how to read your opponent, how to kind of get a sense for how aggressive they are and how willing they are to run things. And you also have to be willing to lose, because sometimes, because of the way this deck works, they're going to index you and win before you can punitive them, and that happens. But what I have found is that despite this deck being kind of, not tier 1 jank, it's really fun, and I win a lot more games than I lose with it, because it really sets people on edge, and it really puts people in dangerous situations, because whatever they're getting, whether it's a Cerebral or a Priority Rec, it has the potential to kill them, and it creates a great damned if you do, damned if you don't, because whatever they could be hitting that's motioned or advanced, it's going to be bad for them if I have money. Thanks very much for watching. Next episode, I'm going to show you my Haley stealth build that I've been working on for a while. Thank you very much for joining us. You can find me at selfmodifyingcode.com, and you can find us on A&R Black Hats on Facebook. My lovely assistant today, let me show you. My lovely assistant today is this guy here. That's my cat, Thor. He likes to make sure that, I know that I've got backup here, and he likes to also destroy my HB deck and just play with cards. But anyway, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Give me some comments and some feedback, and post maybe some decks that you've done, because I can't imagine that I've got the only good cybernetics deck. There's been a lot of interesting ideas, but I think there's a lot still to discover. So take care, and I'll see you guys next time.